Picture this. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stands motionless behind the reinforced glass of the primate observation deck at Mountain Haven Animal Sanctuary, witnessing something that challenges everything she understands about animal intelligence. Mango, a 45-pound capuchin monkey, is methodically collecting stones from the small pond in his habitat, carrying each one in his nimble hands to the southeastern corner, where he arranges them with remarkable precision. The pile has reached nearly 3 feet in height over the past month, and what began as curious behavior has transformed into an all-consuming mission that dominates every moment of the monkey's existence. He's barely eaten in 48 hours, instead choosing to vigilantly guard this enigmatic stone tower with unwavering resolve. Tourists chuckle and snap photos, dismissing what appears to be an amusing animal quirk. But Elena recognizes the fierce determination blazing in Mango's amber eyes. This isn't entertainment. This is survival. The primate's compact frame quivers with fatigue, yet he persists in his labor with the intensity of someone constructing something essential, something critical. Elena had no idea that Mango wasn't simply arranging rocks. He was frantically attempting to prevent a catastrophe that could obliterate everything she devoted her career to protecting. And his desperate architectural endeavor was the sole barrier between the sanctuary and destruction. Let me transport you to the beginning of this extraordinary tale. Elena Rodriguez had committed her professional life to comprehending the intricate emotional worlds of rescued primates. Following her doctorate in comparative psychology from Stanford University, she declined prestigious research opportunities at renowned institutions to join Mountain Haven, a 300-acre refuge tucked away in the Colorado Rockies. The facility provided homes for 28 animals, including various monkey species, lemurs, and other small mammals, all survivors of laboratory experiments, illegal pet trades, or habitat destruction. Elena's expertise in rehabilitating seemingly hopeless cases had garnered international recognition from wildlife protection organizations. More significantly, it had earned her the confidence of creatures who had substantial reasons to distrust humanity. Mango represented her most remarkable rehabilitation success. The intelligent capuchin had arrived 4 years earlier as a traumatized juvenile, confiscated from an underground research facility in Arizona where he'd endured invasive neurological experiments. Upon Elena's first encounter with him, he was severely underweight, petrified of human proximity, and exhibited self-destructive behaviors that shattered her heart. She'd invested countless hours building his trust, communicating in gentle whispers during meal times, avoiding abrupt gestures, consistently honoring his boundaries. Progressively, Mango had evolved into a stunning representation of his species' capabilities. Brilliant, curious, and remarkably social despite his traumatic past. His habitat was Elena's masterpiece. 2 acres of carefully designed environment featuring a natural pond, towering oak trees, rope bridges for climbing, and a climate-controlled shelter for harsh weather. She'd personally supervised every aspect of its development, guaranteeing it exceeded the strictest standards for primate welfare while offering visitors educational insights into capuchin behavior and conservation efforts. The morning light filtered through the aspen trees surrounding the sanctuary, creating dancing patterns across Mango's territory as Elena conducted her standard rounds, notepad ready, completing her daily inspection checklist. Everything had been completely ordinary until 4 weeks ago when Elena spotted the first stone. It was a Wednesday morning in early October when Elena first witnessed Mango's peculiar activity. She was performing her weekly behavioral evaluation, documenting his feeding habits, exercise patterns, and interactions with nearby primates in adjacent enclosures when something seized her attention. Mango was crouched beside the shallow pond, his intelligent eyes focused intently as he examined the polished river stones scattered along the edge. This wasn't particularly strange. Capuchins frequently manipulate objects and explore their surroundings with their hands. However, something felt different about his concentration, something intentional about how he was choosing particular stones. After extended deliberation, Mango selected a rock approximately the size of a baseball and transported it across his habitat to the southeastern corner, where he positioned it against the metal fencing that bordered the sanctuary's maintenance area. Elena recorded the observation in her behavioral log, assuming it might represent novel enrichment activity something to diversify his daily experiences. The following morning revealed 5 stones in the corner. Within a week, the collection contained hundreds. Elena attempted to suppress her mounting anxiety, reminding herself that capuchins were naturally inquisitive creatures who frequently engaged in apparently random activities. Yet this felt fundamentally different. Mango's actions had become systematic, almost ceremonial. He would awaken before sunrise, dedicate entire days to selecting and moving stones, then position himself beside his expanding pile to rest as though protecting it from unseen dangers. Other sanctuary staff had begun noticing the behavior. Marcus Thompson, the senior animal caretaker who'd worked with primates for over 25 years, mentioned during their weekly team meeting that he'd never observed anything comparable. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the facility's chief veterinarian, recommended close monitoring while avoiding interference unless Mango displayed signs of physical harm or distress. Elena desperately wanted to believe this was merely an unusual but harmless behavioral pattern. However, her instincts suggested otherwise. There was urgency in Mango's movements, a desperation that intensified daily. When she approached the southeastern section of his enclosure to examine his construction more closely, the monkey's response sent ice through her veins. Mango had always been affectionate with Elena, often approaching the barrier when she called his name, occasionally permitting her to offer treats through the mesh during feeding sessions. But when she walked toward his stone pile, the 45-pound capuchin positioned himself defensively between her and his construction, chattering aggressively and baring his teeth in a warning display that resonated with primal intensity. The message was unmistakable. Stay away from the stones. Elena retreated immediately, her pulse racing as she struggled to process what she'd witnessed. In 4 years of working with Mango, he had never demonstrated aggressive behavior toward her or any staff member. The monkey's protective stance suggested this wasn't random activity. It was something he deemed critically important, something worth defending. That evening, Elena remained at the sanctuary well past closing, positioned on the observation deck in the gathering twilight, watching Mango's silhouette as he continued working by starlight. The rhythmic sound of stones being placed echoed through the quiet mountains, and she couldn't escape the conviction that she was overlooking something vital, something that would explain this sudden and intense behavioral transformation. Her phone chimed with a message from her colleague, Dr. Patterson, at the university. Any progress on your capuchins building project? The footage you shared has our entire department puzzled. Elena had distributed a brief video of Mango's behavior to several associates, hoping someone might provide insights into what she was observing. Thus far, none of the specialists she'd consulted had encountered anything similar. As she watched Mango carefully adjust another stone's position with surprising accuracy, Elena reached a decision that would transform everything. Tomorrow, she would install continuous surveillance cameras to document his behavioral patterns, and she would begin seeking explanations beyond traditional primate psychology. Something was compelling Mango to construct this mysterious formation, and she was determined to understand what it was before disaster struck. The situation escalated the following Thursday morning when Elena arrived to discover Mango's behavior had intensified dramatically. Where he had previously devoted several hours daily to his stone project, he was now committing virtually every conscious moment to the construction. The pile had grown beyond 4 feet in height and was beginning to extend along the metal barrier, creating what resembled a crude barricade. More alarming was Mango's physical deterioration. Despite the perfect autumn weather for building energy reserves, the monkey had consumed almost nothing over the long weekend. His normally robust frame appeared gaunt, and exhaustion marked his usually bright eyes, indicating severely disrupted sleep patterns. Elena watched with growing alarm as Mango stumbled while carrying a particularly heavy stone, his small body trembling with fatigue. During the sanctuary's morning briefing, Elena presented her findings to the team. He's lost approximately 12 pounds over the past 2 weeks, she explained, indicating the weight chart on her device. His food intake has decreased to less than 25% of normal consumption, and the monitoring cameras reveal he's averaging barely 2 hours of sleep nightly. Dr. Walsh frowned while reviewing the data. This degree of behavioral compulsion combined with rapid weight loss and sleep deprivation indicates we're confronting something more serious than unusual enrichment behavior. I recommend immediate intervention before his health declines further. Marcus Thompson nodded in agreement. I've been working with primates for over 2 decades, and I've never witnessed anything like this. It's as though he's been programmed to build that pile, regardless of the physical cost. Elena felt dread knotting in her stomach. Everything her colleagues argued made perfect sense. They needed to protect Mango's well-being by halting his compulsive behavior, but something profound in her intuition warned that interrupting his work would be a catastrophic mistake. The next day, the sanctuary's administration made the decision without her input. After receiving reports about Mango's deteriorating condition and complaints from visitors regarding the monkey's obvious distress, they authorized immediate action. A team from the State Wildlife Division would arrive that afternoon with sedation equipment and machinery to dismantle the stone pile, and if necessary, temporarily relocate Mango to a medical facility until his behavior stabilized. Elena spent the morning in anguished preparation, attempting to convince herself that forcing Mango to abandon his project was the correct choice. She compiled comprehensive notes for the intervention team, explaining the monkey's background, his typical temperament, and the progression of his stone-stacking obsession. But as she observed him through the viewing window, meticulously selecting each rock with the precision of a skilled architect, she couldn't shake the certainty that they were about to commit a grievous error. The intervention team arrived at 1:30 precisely. 2 wildlife officers with tranquilizer equipment, a machinery operator with a small excavator, and Dr. Harrison, a specialist in abnormal primate behavior from the State College. Elena met them at the facility's entrance, her stomach churning as she guided them toward Mango's enclosure. As they approached the southeastern corner, where the stone pile now towered almost 5 feet high and stretched 15 feet along the barrier, Dr. Harrison whistled in astonishment. I've studied compulsive behaviors in captive primates, but I've never seen construction of this magnitude. It's almost engineering in its sophistication. The wildlife officers began preparing their equipment while the machinery operator evaluated the optimal approach for demolishing the structure. Elena found herself holding her breath as she observed Mango's reaction to the unusual commotion around his territory. The monkey immediately positioned himself between the approaching humans and his stone construction, his compact frame rigid with protective alertness. When the excavator roared to life, Mango released a shriek that seemed to pierce the mountain air itself. Elena had never heard him produce such a sound. It was raw, desperate, filled with a terror that froze her blood. That's not typical defensive behavior, Dr. Harrison observed, his voice strained with concern. That's the vocalization of an animal who believes he's fighting for his life. The first tranquilizer dart struck Mango in the thigh, and Elena watched in horror as the remarkable monkey staggered but refused to abandon his position protecting the stones. Even as the sedative began taking effect, he continued to place his small body between the machinery and his construction project, swaying unsteadily but refusing to surrender what had become his life's mission. When Mango finally collapsed, Elena felt tears flowing down her face. As the excavator began clearing away the carefully positioned stones, she couldn't escape the feeling that they were destroying something crucial, something that might have been the key to understanding not only Mango's behavior, but something far more significant than any of them comprehended. The consequences of the intervention tormented Elena for weeks. Mango had emerged from sedation confused and clearly devastated by the destruction of his stone pile. He spent the first 4 days after the removal pacing frantically around the corner where his construction had stood, occasionally producing heartbreaking vocalizations that sounded almost like weeping. Eventually, he began eating again, and his sleep patterns normalized. But something fundamental seemed extinguished. The spark of purpose and intelligence that had driven his behavior vanished, replaced by a profound melancholy that concerned Elena more than his previous obsession. The sanctuary's board celebrated the intervention's success. Mango was physically healthy again, his behavior had returned to normal patterns, and visitor concerns had ceased. But Elena couldn't release the persistent feeling that they'd missed something critical. She found herself returning to the surveillance footage repeatedly, studying hours of video, showing Mango's methodical construction process, searching for clues they might have overlooked. During one of these late-night review sessions, she noticed something that made her heart race. In the background of several recordings, barely perceptible unless you knew where to look, Hairline fractures had begun appearing in the concrete foundation where Mango had been building his stone pile. The cracks were subtle initially, almost invisible, but throughout the 4-week period of his construction project, they had steadily expanded and multiplied. Elena immediately contacted Marcus Thompson and Dr. Walsh to examine the footage. As the three of them studied the time-lapse progression of the crack development, a horrifying possibility began emerging. "Those aren't settling cracks," Marcus said, his voice grave as he indicated the screen. "That concrete is failing under some type of stress." "The question is, stress from what?" Dr. Walsh accessed the sanctuary's construction blueprints on her computer. "According to these documents, there's a major water main that runs directly beneath that section of the foundation. It's part of the primary line that services the entire mountainside community." Elena felt her blood turn cold as the implication struck her. Mango wasn't building randomly. He was constructing directly above the point where the water main passed underneath the enclosure, and these cracks suggested the pipeline might be compromised. The three stared at each other in stunned silence as understanding dawned. Mango's urgent, obsessive behavior hadn't been a psychological disorder. It had been a desperate attempt to create reinforcement over what his extraordinary senses had detected as a dangerous water main failure. Capuchin monkeys possessed exceptional tactile sensitivity and hearing, capable of detecting minute vibrations and pressure changes that humans couldn't perceive. While they'd focused on treating his abnormal behavior, Mango had been trying to prevent a catastrophic flood that could destroy the sanctuary. The emergency response was immediate and comprehensive. Within 90 minutes of Elena's discovery, the County Utilities Department, Emergency Management Team, and Water Authority engineers had arrived at Mountain Haven. Using specialized detection equipment, they confirmed what Mango had somehow recognized for weeks. The high-pressure water main running beneath his enclosure had developed multiple stress fractures, likely caused by recent soil shifts in the region. Water had been slowly leaking into the surrounding earth, creating dangerous erosion that could have caused a complete pipeline rupture and devastating flood. The evacuation directive came at dusk. All 28 animals were loaded into transport vehicles and relocated to partner facilities throughout the region, while emergency crews worked continuously to repair the damaged water main. The sanctuary's buildings were cleared of all staff, and a quarter-mile safety zone was established around the leak site. As Elena helped transfer Mango into the specialized transport container that would take him to a temporary home at the Denver Zoo, she found herself apologizing to the remarkable monkey who had tried so desperately to protect them all. "I'm sorry we didn't listen," she whispered through the container's air vents. "I'm sorry we didn't understand what you were trying to communicate." Mango looked at her with those intelligent amber eyes, and for a moment, Elena could have sworn she detected forgiveness there. The Water Authority's investigation revealed that the pipeline failure could have resulted in a catastrophic flood affecting a 500-yard radius, easily sufficient to destroy most of the sanctuary's facilities and endanger anyone in the immediate vicinity. The fractures had been caused by gradual ground movement from a series of minor earth shifts that had occurred throughout the summer. Geological activity so subtle that human monitoring equipment had barely detected it. But Mango's sensitive hands and feet, in constant contact with the ground as he navigated his territory daily, had felt every tremor, every shift in the earth that was slowly compromising the pipeline's stability. The story spread quickly through social media and news networks, evolving from a simple animal behavior mystery into a powerful example of primate intelligence and environmental sensitivity. Videos of Mango systematically building his stone barrier were viewed millions of times, with comments from viewers worldwide expressing amazement at the monkey's prescient behavior and regret at humanity's failure to recognize his warning signals. Dr. Harrison, the animal behavior specialist who had supervised the intervention, published a comprehensive study about the case in the International Journal of Primate Psychology, advocating for a fundamental change in how behavioral scientists approach unusual animal activities. "We must consider the possibility," he wrote, "that animals are responding to environmental conditions we cannot detect rather than assuming that unfamiliar behaviors are automatically pathological." 4 months after the pipeline repair was completed, Elena stood once again at the observation deck of Mango's enclosure, watching the extraordinary capuchin explore his restored habitat. The southeastern corner where he had built his stone barrier was now marked with a small commemorative plaque that read, "In honor of Mango, whose intelligence protected us all." The monkey had shown no inclination to resume his construction project since returning home, apparently satisfied that the danger had passed. The sanctuary's reopening had drawn visitors from around the globe, all eager to meet the famous intuitive monkey who had predicted disaster. But Elena understood the truth was both simpler and more remarkable than supernatural abilities. Mango had simply been attentive to his environment in ways that humans, with their dependence on technology and dismissal of animal intelligence, had failed to achieve. As she watched Mango peacefully foraging along the pond's edge, selecting smooth stones to examine before gently returning them to the water, Elena reflected on everything the experience had taught her about truly listening to the animals in her care. She'd spent years studying their behavior, but it had taken nearly losing everything to realize that sometimes the most crucial communications were the ones that seemed most bewildering. The sanctuary had established new protocols based on Mango's case. Any unusual persistent behavioral changes would trigger immediate environmental assessments using both technological instruments and careful observation of what the animals might be perceiving that humans were missing. Other wildlife facilities worldwide had adopted similar approaches, recognizing that their animals might serve as early warning systems for dangers that conventional monitoring might miss. 2 years later, Mountain Haven Animal Sanctuary had become a leading facility for animal-human cooperation and environmental monitoring. The Mango Protocol was being implemented at zoos and sanctuaries across 4 continents, and Elena found herself traveling internationally to lecture about the importance of treating animal intelligence as a valuable resource rather than a puzzle to be solved. But perhaps the most significant change was in Elena's daily routine. Each morning as she made her rounds through the sanctuary, she spent additional time at each enclosure, not just observing the animals' health and behavior, but listening, truly listening to what they might be attempting to communicate about their world and ours. Mango had taught her that wisdom manifests in countless forms, and sometimes the most important messages arrive not through language or technology, but through the patient, desperate actions of a creature trying to protect those he cares about, even when they don't comprehend what he's trying to convey. The monkey who had once stacked stones in urgent warning now spent his days in tranquil satisfaction, confident that his message had finally been understood. And Elena had discovered that sometimes the greatest scientific breakthrough is simply acknowledging that the animals we protect might understand things we do not, and having the humility to pay attention when they attempt to share that knowledge with us. If you've ever observed unusual animal behavior that seemed to defy explanation, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes our animal companions are trying to communicate something vital, and sharing these experiences helps us all become better listeners. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of animal intelligence and the remarkable ways wildlife continues to surprise and educate us. Until next time, remember that wisdom comes in all sizes, even when it weighs 45 pounds and speaks through stones.